What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and it's Tuesday, so we're going to talk through my must-add waiver wire targets for Week 15 of the fantasy football season, whether you're here because you made the fantasy playoffs or you're here because you're trying to avoid a last-place punishment or you just want to screw your friends out of the good waiver wire pickups. We're going to cover it all. We're going to go through running backs, receivers, tight ends, quarterbacks, a few defenses at the end, all under 40% owned in ESPN leagues. As always, if you enjoy, leave a like, subscribe if you're new. And we are going to start with the running backs. Now, in the past, we've done priority ads, but we're at a point in the year where I can't stress enough, the fab bids don't really matter. It really just comes down to your team, your league, your desperation. There's also game theory to be thinking about of maybe you don't even need a running back, but maybe there's a running back that your opponent needs because he doesn't have a good RB heading into week 15. Maybe he needs to kind of pick one up. You can now sort of think through blocking your opponents, getting players for later rounds, and just overall the game theory that is fantasy football. So keep all of that in mind. Every player that's on this list, how much you should bid on them comes down to how much you need them or how much your opponent might need them in the fantasy playoffs. Now, with the running back position, we are going to start up top with Chris Rodriguez. Now, I will do my best to give a estimated what I would bid on these players on the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. Over there, you can get my weekly waiver wire article. We'll have all the way through week 17 where I break down all of these players in depth along with the exact amount of fab I am bidding on every single player. On top of that, you'll get my last rest of season rankings that come out tonight, which are pretty much just going to be like my playoff rankings for the next 3 weeks. How would I rank things from here on out? And then my weekly rankings the rest of the way. Patreon.com/Ron Stewart. You can get that in the description and the comment section down below. Now, Chris Rodriguez, a little bit off the beaten path. Like I assume that he is not the guy who's getting talked about in all these videos. We did talk about him last week. Maybe he's picked up in your league, but he now has 10 or more touches in 4 of his last 5 games. And he is the consensus RB28 versus the Giants this week, who allow the second most fantasy points to opposing running backs. You can 100% do a lot worse than Chris Rodriguez in your RB2 spot. Then my second running back ad is Devin Singletary. Tyrone Tracy, it seems like he's going to be fine, but the Giants are on the other side of this game, playing against the Commanders, who allow the 5th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Devin Singletary is the consensus RB30 this week. And the Giants now, this is a stat from Ian Hartitz over on Twitter. The Giants have 4 top 15 PPR finishes in their last 3 games. That's like between Tracy and Singletary. They've been scoring points at the running back position. Then we have Blake Corum. This one's probably the hot name this week. He is the RB3 in PPR scoring over the last 2 weeks. And this is a good summation here from Ryan Heath on his usage this past week, saying over the past 2 weeks, the Rams have had a back and forth loss and then a dominant win. Blake Corum has outgained Kyren Williams on the ground in both of them. Corum finished with only 1 fewer carry and was involved throughout. He outcarried Williams in the first quarter and saw the same number as him in the third. This isn't that different from the Bears' 55-45 backfield split, but instead of it being the Bears, it's the Rams, where they're going to have a top 3 implied total in terms of scoring by Vegas from here on out. So Corum is a very valuable handcuff that you can also now probably flex or put in the RB2 spot if you're in a pinch moving forward. Then we'll talk about Tyler Algier. Nothing crazy, just very simply Bijan's handcuff. We'll talk about Jalen Wright and Ollie Gordon. Devon Achane goes down with a rib injury. It seems like it was precautionary. I think that Devon Achane is going to be fine, but we're at the point of the year where it's definitely worth rostering these guys. Jalen Wright did get the nod in this game as the true backup. When we look at the utilization report over on fantasylife.com, it's clear down the board, Jalen Wright had a better usage than Ollie Gordon across the board. Rush attempts, snap share, route share, everything. But Ollie Gordon is a rookie. It seems like things have swip-swapped over the entire season. Things could change down the stretch. So if you're in a deeper league, I think Ollie Gordon is still very much worth an ad, but Jalen Wright is the priority here. Then we can talk about Michael Carter. It's not that Michael Carter is like a great player or a great ad, but I don't know what's going on with Trey Benson. It seems like Trey Benson's probably not going to be back. I mean, I'm not going to say probably not. Like, there's a very good chance he could get activated off of IR this week, but if he's not, then I think that that's pretty much it for Trey Benson. And then Michael Carter, you could say Bam Knight, but he's over 40% owned. I assume that he's already owned in your league. And Michael Carter's been a guy who's put up decent stats here and there. He had 11.4 PPR points against Tampa Bay the week before. Against the Rams, they get killed, but he's a guy to own where if Bam Knight goes down and somehow this Cardinals backfield is down to their fourth stringer, Michael Carter would be a must start. And then we have Dylan Sampson. He had a 39% snap share in this game. That was his highest since before the Week 9 bye for the Browns. I don't think Judkins is going anywhere, but Sampson might be leapfrogging Jerome Ford here down the stretch. And if Judkins was to go down or get hurt, Dylan Sampson would be a potential league winner, to be honest. Now, the wide receivers are pretty weak. I remember saying kind of at the mid to late, like middle, late portion of the year, we touched on how strong the wide receivers have been off of the waiver wire, right? You got Christian Watson. You got Alec Pierce off of the waiver wire. There's been a lot of players. I mean, like Trey Tucker really early on. Kayshon Boutte had some weeks as well. Michael Wilson, of course, is another big one. Right now, the waiver wire for wide receivers is pretty dry, so you're going to see a lot of rookie wide receivers here. Over the span of me doing this, there have been so many rookie wide receivers come out of nowhere and be league winners. We've seen Amon-Ra St. Brown do it as a rookie. Rashee Rice, Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, even guys off the beaten path like Tank Dell and Elijah Moore, and just across the board, even like Chase Claypool his rookie year was a really fun player. You see guys come out of the woodworks all the time. Now, of course, you're going to have your studs who are just studs throughout, Jefferson, Chase, Puka, Jalen McMillan last year, if you remember. Jalen McMillan was an absolute stud in the fantasy playoffs, won people genuinely millions of dollars last year down the stretch. So this is honestly just for fun, talking about Jalen McMillan, but he's kind of the poster boy for this, where Teteroa McMillan's going to be great. Maybe Ibuka bounces back, but we're looking for guys off the beaten path. That's what Jalen McMillan was last year. Week 14, he had 21.9 PPR points. 15, he had 18.5, then 16.7, then 23. Over the last 4 weeks, right, so week 14, 15, 16, 17, Jalen McMillan was averaging like 20 points per game last year. People really forget that. Of course, he's now buried on that depth chart coming back from a neck injury, but it just goes to show that we're probably going to have one random rookie wide receiver be a guy down the stretch. So we want to be stashing those players. Luther Burden, to me, is the number one guy, only rostered in 15.9% of leagues. We can look at the rookie receiver report here. He runs a season high 69% of the routes in week 14, up from 57% the week before. Of course, Rome Odunze's hurt. DJ Moore's been a non-factor in this loss. Luther Burden led the Bears wide receivers in target share, first read share, receiving first downs, yards per out run, yards. He had 6 targets, 4 catches, 67 yards. All 4 of his catches were first downs, 2.48 yards per out run, 8.3 yard ADOT. His 9% first downs per route run mark is only behind Teteroa McMillan on the year. He's the only rookie receiver with a 20% targets per out run or better and a 2+ yards per out run or better. The sample size is big enough now that we can be pretty certain that Luther Burden is a good player. We just need more routes, and I think that we are sprinting towards him running 80% plus of the routes as soon as this week. Then things fall off a cliff, I'll be honest with you guys. The next guy I have here is Ryan Flournoy. He's okay. It just kind of comes down to what's going on with CeeDee Lamb. We still don't really have any reports here. He suffered a concussion in the Thursday night game. Gives him a little bit extra time to recover, but if he can't go, Ryan Flournoy has been pretty good as a flex option. He is among 88 wide receivers that qualify. He is 13th in first downs per out run, 32nd in yards per out run, 38th in targets per out run. For a random player competing for routes with CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, and Jake Ferguson, these are all really solid numbers. He has 2 games of 100+ receiving yards this season, and in this game against Detroit on Thursday, he had, I want to say like 9 catches for 114 yards or something like that. He had 13 targets, 9 catches, 115 yards, and a touchdown this past week. He gets Minnesota. Just keep an eye on CeeDee Lamb here heading into the week. Then we can talk about Devon Vele. Again, we're dumpster diving here. He's coming off back-to-back weeks of a 26% target share, kind of getting some rapport here with Tyler Shuck, but we're talking about Devon Vele on the Saints. Then we just have some rookie stashes, guys that I wouldn't start, but could maybe be Jalen McMillan, where they come out of nowhere and then all of a sudden you're starting them in week 16 and they go crazy. Pat Bryant, his route share fell by 10% this week, but he's now had 2 weeks in a row off of the bye week of running more routes than Troy Franklin. That's super impressive, but Sean Payton's really tough to trust. And then Jack Besh. He had a 79% route share this past week. Yes, the Raiders wide receiver room was banged up, but he had 6 targets, 6 catches, 50 yards, 2 first downs, 1.61 yards per out run in a game that had Kenny Pickett at quarterback, and it was just absolutely brutal. Jack Besh could maybe be a guy here down the stretch, but again, we're really dumpster diving. Outside of Burden and Flournoy, those are rough options. Those are our deep league options that we're looking at here. And then we just kind of have our grab bag of tight ends, quarterbacks, and defenses. We'll start with tight end. Again, we're chasing rookie upside here. We just saw it with Harold Fannin. I will say, too, I want to make sure that I'm talking about players who are available in your leagues, guys who probably aren't but are worth looking at. Jaden Reed, working his way back up from injury with the Packers. He could be a factor down the stretch. And then also we can talk about Harold Fannin. There's no way he's on your waiver wire, but if he is, he could be a league winner down the stretch. But Colston Loveland, just below our 40% threshold. He's a consensus tight end 12 this week. And even though his route share hasn't budged, and it's been a little bit frustrating with Cole Kmet there, he now has, since week 9 against Cincinnati, 29.8 PPR points, 9.57, 14.9, 5.8, 12.9. So he's kind of been boom or bust, but that's just the nature of the tight end position. Then we have Isaiah Likely, who in back-to-back weeks, this week he should have had a touchdown. The week before he should have had a touchdown where he fumbled it into the back of the end zone. I think he still had a pretty decent week both of those weeks. He's now been at 10-plus PPR points in 2 of his last 2 games. And against Cincinnati this week, who, when we look at this Ian Hartitz tweet, this is just a great representation of how bad the Bengals have been against tight ends. The gap in PPR points per game allowed to opposing tight ends between the Bengals and the next worst defense, the Jaguars, is the same as the Jaguars, and the third best defense, the Raiders. It's absurd. We saw last week Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid both put up strong fantasy points performances against the Bengals. Then we can talk about Mike Gesicki. T. Higgins concussion, probably not playing this week. Gesicki has had 4+ targets in every game since his return. He's not going to run a ton of routes. It's scary to start him, but he's essentially their wide receiver 2 if T. Higgins can't go. Then Colby Parkinson. He's been the tight end 5 since week 10. The Rams score a ton of points. They've kind of settled in on Colby Parkinson being their tight end 1. He is absolutely startable in fantasy. And then Mason Taylor. This one's a desperation one. He had 8 targets last week, which is great. But the Jets quarterback this week is potentially Brady Cook. Like a day 3 pick out of Missouri. Not a good player. Then we can talk about quarterback streamers. I doubt Jaden Daniels plays this week or anytime soon. And over his last 3 starts, Mariota has had 19.8 points per game. That's a really strong number. J.J. McCarthy. It's tough to trust everybody on this list not named Mariota. McCarthy gets the Cowboys to allow the most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. He's coming off maybe his best game as a pro so far. We shall see, but that is really rolling the dice in the first round of the fantasy playoffs. Then you have Tyler Shuck. He has 20-plus points per game in his last 2 starts. He gets Carolina, which is a tough defense in a divisional game. Then Shador, 30 bomb last week after not really showing much life as a fantasy asset. He gets Chicago this week, who allows the 8th most points to opposing quarterbacks. Not a terrible matchup here. McCarthy through Sanders are really more so if you're in like a 16-teamer and you're streaming a quarterback or a super flex league, something like that. If you're in a 1-quarterback league, I mean, I don't know, maybe you lose Jaden Daniels, but I assume you have Mariota. It's rough times for streaming quarterbacks right now. Then we'll talk about defenses. We have the 49ers as my number 1 defense of the week. Salah's unit has been humming. They get the Titans this week, who have allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing tight ends, or defenses, my bad. Then you have the Bears defense playing against the Browns and Shador. The Browns have allowed the 4th most fantasy points to opposing defenses. And then you have the Cowboys. The Cowboys defense sucks, but the Vikings have allowed the most points to opposing defenses. If J.J. McCarthy has a stinker, the Cowboys could be a magical defense this week. Now, that's going to do it for us today. Again, my entire waiver wire article will be on the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. But if you can't support there or you're already signed up, leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you guys in the next one.
pockets froze, ice cold.